Unlike Lars von Trier's previous film, Antichrist, which I loathed, I liked Melancholia. It's a rather dull film that struggles to engage the viewer, but it's also a prime example of how a great ending can elevate an otherwise mediocre movie. Kirsten Dunst, in the most challenging role of her career, stars as Justine, a woman suffering from severe depression who can't even put on the act of happiness on her wedding night. The film's somber drama takes place against the backdrop of a rogue planet called Melancholia on a collision course with Earth, making this von Trier's only science fiction film. Dunst's performance in Melancholia is astounding, as she delivers a realistic, layered performance as a woman with extreme depression whose mask of happiness, which is deliberately conjured by Justine, slowly erodes under the stress, attention, and expectations of her wedding night. While Justine is never likable per se, the intensity of her unhappiness, and the wedding planners, her sister Claire and brother-in-law John, forcing her to be happy, makes it clear that Justine is mentally ill and her depression isn't her fault. However, I will say that Justine still isn't sympathetic, as there is no sense of regret or self-awareness from her. Justine is persistently unhappy, but there is no indication that she wants to be happy. But then, Justine not really being sympathetic was probably part of the point, as Melancholia somewhat effectively investigates the feedback relationship between someone with depression and his or her environment. During the reception, you share Claire and John's frustration at Justine repeatedly drifting off and stalling their carefully planned celebrations, and you feel really sad for Michael, who is a very kind, gentle, and devoted man who can't get through to Justine on this most important of nights. This mounting pressure makes Justine's depression harder to conceal, which in turn makes the pressure to act happy grow further. One problem I have with the wedding reception setup is that it feels a little artificial. If Justine is known to suffer from serious depression, you'd expect Claire and John to have taken that more into account when planning the reception, and you expect Michael to have been a bit more forgiving. I also think that the film started too late, and should have depicted the wedding itself in the first half, as Justine being, or acting, happy at her wedding is far more crucial and would have generated more dramatic tension. And that's Melancholia's biggest flaw, the lack of suspense. In the first half of the film, we watch Justine's marriage and state of mind crumble as she fails to manage her depression at the worst possible time, but it's far too slow, plodding, and subdued for you to invest yourself much in it. The film is supposed to make the reception feel interminable, mirroring how Justine feels, but the film overreaches that mark and becomes boring, even with the adept characterization, Kiefer Sutherland's stern coolness, and some moments of levity from Udo Kier and John Hurt. Even in the second half, which delivers tension in the form of the oncoming rogue planet, and has Justine and Claire develop in tandem, is still rather slow and dull. And while she certainly isn't a bad actress, I don't really like Charlotte Gainsbourg's acting style for most of the movie, as it often feels opaque and too deliberate. Regarding this development, Justine initially sinks further into depression until she becomes almost catatonic, but as Claire, who tries to help her out of this depression, gets swept up in worry about the looming planet, Justine's spirits lift, relatively speaking, and she becomes more stable, alert, and centered. This is because the expectations for her to be happy are dropped and she is able to be herself, and von Trier also wrote Melancholia to show how depressed people can remain calm in stressful situations, as they are more equipped to deal with them than happy people. This gradual character development in the second half is where the film finally becomes engaging, and the planet threatening Earth allows von Trier to contrast Justine's situation of things getting worse before they get better, as they often do, with Claire's situation of things getting better before they get worse. The planet Melancholia strikes a constant note of growing tension and danger, even if the film is still far too long and drawn out, and you feel Claire's wary hope as the planet appears to recede, and then her despair as it loops back and closes in to collide with Earth, hence things getting better than worse for her. I also like the relationship between Claire, John, and their son Leo, as John eagerly studies Melancholia through the telescope with his son, gathers supplies for the flyby, and tries to calm Claire by insisting that Melancholia will not hit Earth. John is my favorite character in the film, as Kiefer Sutherland brings his natural commanding charisma to the role, but also John's excitement about this extraordinary astronomical event, even as it poses a grave threat to Earth, is exactly how I'd feel in that situation. The film's second half also shows how alike John and Justine are, despite his resentment of her in the first half. As a husband, father, and scientist, John too is obligated to put on an aura of courage and positive vibes in the face of this celestial danger, and though it is genuine for most of the film, it ultimately falters to reveal the worry he'd been hiding. I also like the personal touch of the family using a very fine device of coiled wire at the end of a rod to monitor the planet's approach, as it offers a simple yet profound perspective on the events. I like how this child's way of viewing the crisis carries such impact. The planet itself is also a beautiful effect that leads to some gorgeous visuals. Finally, the ending packs a real wallop. What follows are spoilers about what happens in the ending, but I feel it is necessary to tell you what happens in order to show you how emotionally gripping it was for me. John commits suicide when it turns out that Melancholia will hit the Earth after all, and this came as a huge shock to me. It's heartening to see Justine, finally healed, insofar as she can be, smile genuinely and show a caring love for her nephew, and Charlotte Gainsbourg's performance in the final moments is phenomenal. Melancholia is a film that starts off very dull and boring, and remains that way for quite a long time, but it does get significantly better later, and has a pretty damn good ending. You can look at the film in two ways. The poor first half makes the great second half look better, or the great second half makes the poor first half look worse. Either way, Melancholia is a good movie that I enjoyed, and earns 3 3/4 stars out of 5. Thanks for watching. Cheers.